Jamy, welcome to the show.
Hey, I appreciate you having me. Thanks, Jim.
Yeah, man. So you work with a lot of leaders. I work with a lot of leaders in terms of leadership development. A lot of leaders approach their role as having tasks to do, getting their job done, getting work to do, and that sort of getting, being caught in the weeds instead of being a leader. Like, why is leadership more important than doing the stuff?
I would say I am biased, just like you. I do think leadership is more important, but it's one of those maybe 51, 49% type things, because if you're not in the weeds, if you're not competent, I think that's important. If you're not competent and you're not doing those day-to-day or know how to get those day-to-day tasks done, then you're not going to be a very good leader. People aren't going to rally around you. People aren't going to be inspired by you because you're incompetent. See, we get leadership and management confused sometimes. They're not synonymous, even though we tend to put it that way. We tend to lump both of those in the same conversation. But managing is kind of what you talked about, being in the weeds, the day-to-day tasks, doing things, getting things done. Leadership is more about making people better, making situations better, inspiring, providing hope for people. Also, leadership is not about a position. Let's say you have a bank. My wife works in a bank. You have a bank manager who could be considered the leader. They would definitely be, from a positional standpoint or on a flow chart, they're the leader. But you could have the newest bank teller in that bank could be a leader because they can influence the person next to them at break time, at lunchtime. Their attitude could wear off, good or bad, on their coworkers. And then before you know it, that manager has very little to say with the culture that's going on, because these individual people are screwing up the culture. These individual people are making things good or making things better. So anyone could be a leader in any business or on any team. Obviously, the person with a position, status, a title will have more of a platform, oftentimes more of an opportunity to set that direction or set that vision or be a change agent in a quicker way. But anyone can be a leader, first of all. But then coming back to the management, leadership type stuff, as a leader, you better have some management abilities or people will stop following you. As a coach, you could be the rah-rah, you could give the best motivational speeches, everyone could love you. And you've probably heard this before on teams that you work with. Oh, I really like coach, but coach isn't really a very good coach, but man, I really like him or I like her. That will only take you so far. You've got to be competent. But there's a lot of managers that have no leadership. They don't go from the day-to-day task and inspire anyone. Managers oftentimes might be the smartest person in the room. They might know exactly what should be done, but then people aren't inspired by them. So nobody, look forward to coming to work in the morning because, hey, Jim is great with the TPS reports. Man, Jim knows how to fax something. I'm dating myself. Jim knows how to put together the best memos or, man, the best standard operating procedures. That doesn't get people out of bed in the morning to come to the job and do this job to the best of their ability. They're just doing it for a paycheck. So you've got to find a way, if you want to take your culture to another level or have a great work environment, you've got to find a way to go from just being a really good manager to being a good leader. How can you inspire people, make people better, make situations better where people, no one's going to do somersaults and jumping jacks and be really excited to come to work if it's like the bank or if it's a real estate or an insurance agency or whatever it is. But a good leader that maybe inspires people, makes it a little bit more fun to work at this place or is catching people being good, fist bumping every once in a while, high fives. Hey, how's your family? That kind of stuff. Someone that goes from the managerial stuff now into the leadership where you're making people better. Now, all of a sudden, you're going to tend to have employees that maybe give you the benefit of the doubt a little bit longer. They might stay at that job a little bit longer, and now your retention is a little bit better. You have less transitions, less people you got to hire, and so your culture is more sustainable. All that stuff.
Yeah. The challenge is, like, a lot of leaders get put into that position because they're good at the TPS reports and the memos, and they're good at something, and so people go, oh well, let's just put them in charge of a bunch of other people who have to do those things, and it's like that's not that's great. There's the competence piece that you said, and they might, a lot of leaders maybe have that ability to execute the same job that they used to do and that all their direct reports are doing. But it's that leadership piece, that ability to inspire, that I think that's the hard part. And I don't want to like put anybody down for being that their Ferris Bueller type character. I mean, I kind of see some of that in myself. Like, I'm good at doing things, but when I'm put into leadership positions, like, and have been in the past, like, I have to actually think about leadership. It doesn't necessarily come natural. It's like, wait a second, okay, I can't just tell people, hey, go do A, B, and C, or go, when I was wrestling coach, hey, just show up at practice and do the work, do what I say, and then go home and come back and do what I say again tomorrow. Like, there has to be, intention around communication, painting the vision, inspiring, building relationships, developing trust. And not everybody is going to be, like you mentioned, like, giving the high fives and patting people on the back and saying, how's your family? Like, that comes naturally to some people, and they're sort of naturally maybe outgoing, but you can be a great leader and be an introvert, but then you're going to have to, extrovert, introvert doesn't make you a good leader one way or the other. It's just, regardless, you have to be intentional about the activity and actions of leadership.
Yeah, you hit upon that word right at the end. That was awesome. Intentional. You might be an introvert. You might not even like people. All right. You've got to figure out a way to intentionally, purposefully get involved with the people, even if you don't totally like people in general. And there's managers out there like that. There's leaders, there's people in charge that don't like people, or are introverted. Let's say that I know those aren't the same. They're not the same thing. But with that being said, you've got to find a way and understand that you might be introverted. You might not even be comfortable giving a rah-rah speech or whatever. That's fine. A one-on-one, I go up to Jim. I'm like, hey, your wife was having knee surgery. How did that go? Or, hey, your grandpa X, Y, or Z, or your mom X, Y, or Z, or you ask them, hey, you got vacation coming up, any big plans or whatever. And you could be, a negative person could be like, well, I don't want to get involved in their business and all that stuff. Well, then figure out a way to get involved without getting too personally. So, Jim, if you like a certain sports team, that's not being personal to be like, hey, they're in the playoffs. You're going to watch the game. You're going to watch the game. You're going to go to a sports bar. You're going to watch it with friends or whatever. Talk about something that's important to them. Mm-hmm. I started doing that toward the back half of my career as a coach. I started doing that with our athletes before practice. I would pick 2 or 3 players every day, and I would intentionally go up to them and talk to them about something I had already decided I was going to talk to them. And it'd only be a 2 or 3 minute conversation. And when I'm done with them, I'm like, hey, Jim, maybe you're shooting free throws at the side and I'm rebounding for you for 2 or 3 minutes while we talk about Tom Brady. You know what? When we're done with that, real quick, I'm going to hand you the ball. I'm going to high five you or something and be like, hey, this is going to be a good practice. I like your form. It's going to be fun today. I'll see you in a few minutes. And then you walk over to, the next person that you're going to talk to, and they're maybe tying their shoe. Well, you can do that in your place of business as well. You can be like, hey, what can I talk to Jim about today that's not calling him into the office, calling him into the principal's office type thing? What can I do to start connecting with Jim a little bit more? Because then those little small connections, you do those for 6, 7, 8 weeks. If you approach it from a long game perspective, after 6, 7, 8 weeks, you've melted some ice, you've built more connection, you've built a little bit more trust. You've put some emotional deposits into that emotional bank account.
And for the listener, I want to point out, like Jamy talked about, being very intentional about, okay, there's 2 or 3 players I'm going to go talk to today, and investing that time. And it's easy as a leader to think, okay, I need to do my TPS reports, or I need to talk to so-and-so about him doing his TPS reports or her doing hers. But you're talking about something about relationship building, and those conversations with a leader are so impactful. Like, is leaders, and again, leader by title, leader just by becoming a leader from wherever you're at, like having those intentional conversations with people are so much more impactful than you know. I think than all of us. If we took leadership out of the question or out of the equation here, we're just talking about like if you go approach somebody and talk about them, ask them about them, focus on them, those conversations are so powerful. I think back to when I was wrestling, there was a conversation I had with a guy named Mike Krafchick on my wrestling team. I was a freshman. He was a fifth-year senior, and he used to beat the living tar out of me at practice. He was an All-American, and I wanted to be like Mike. And I had a conversation with him once after practice, and that conversation. And the conversation was essentially this. I mean, everybody had left the room. Mike always stayed late. And Mike's in there doing some extra conditioning by himself. And I'm like, I'm just going to sit around and watch Mike. I jumped on the Airdyne bike. And I'm doing a little bit of workout and watching Mike. And then afterwards we chatted. And he talked about sort of, like, how do you get as good as you get? And he talked about his level of just the work that he puts in, the extra work ethic, and how I can do it. And he believed in me and all this. And I ended up following in his footsteps and becoming an All-American as well. And I guarantee you he has no idea. He does no recollection of that conversation, but I do because I'm talking with a leader. So those conversations, Jamy, that you're talking about are so important, so impactful. They're more important than the TPS report, or at least in your view, 51% more important,
And sometimes people hear what I just said or some of the stuff we're talking about, and they're like, oh, great. We're going to church. Let's just sit around, join hands, sing Kumbaya. I have to be overly sensitive to everything and care about everybody's feelings, and I have to constantly be praising everybody. I'm not saying that. I never want you to be positive without any substance there. But you hired a person for a reason, or there's a person you recruited on your sports team, or the people are on your team for a reason. Now, it might have just been to fill a role. Okay. But if it's even just to fill that spot, you probably should have equipped them or trained them a little bit to do a certain job. They can do something. So that's where you start. Start with what they can do, not with what they can't do. And a lot of times we're like, oh, Jim just drives me crazy because he can't do this, this, and this. It's terrible. Well, he might not be able to do everything right, but he can do something. Find the thing that he can do well. Praise him for that. Try to encourage him, inspire him in that area to do that even better. And then that's going to now build up a little bit more trust with you, so he doesn't hate your guts as much. So he listens to you. So then when you then try to help him be better in the areas he's struggling in, he's going to listen to you a little bit more than he would have 3 weeks ago. Once again, we're playing the long game. Now, if I'm trying to change Jim by the end of the week, we may have a problem. And sometimes we've seen this to a certain degree. An athletic director is going to fire a coach, but he's going to give him one more week. Or, hey, you do this, by the end of whatever. You give him a time frame and you just throw that out there. Or, hey, here's your personal improvement plan. You need to improve by the end of the week or by the end of the month or whatever time frame that is. Sometimes we maybe place, it gets down to where, it's at the end and there's not much that can be done. But if you start early and think the long game, hey, I'm not thinking about I'm going to fire Jim or not fire Jim. I'm always thinking, how can I make Jim better? How can I not take him from 0 to 100 right away, not get him to where he's the employee of the month, but just get better every single day, not get him from where I want him to be or where he is now to where I want him to be, just get him from where he is now to a little bit better tomorrow and a little bit better the next day. And sometimes we lose sight of that because Jim's not to the point where we want him yet. Well, yeah, of course, it takes time.
Yeah, it's an investment. It's people. People are not widgets. You can't, hammer them and put a couple more screws in and some duct tape and they're just fixed tomorrow. It takes time. These are people and we have to develop them. So Jamy, you've gotten into this field of leadership coaching, leadership speaking, certified John Maxwell speaker and coach. That's a pretty big pivot from your career. I mean, you were doing what you do. You were a coach, an athletic director. You were successful there. Why? And I'm going to ask you the question of why pivot? But because a lot of my listeners, just like a lot of people in general, are thinking, they're in their job and it's fine, and maybe they're making a good living, maybe they're comfortable there, but they think there's more, there's something different, maybe a calling, maybe something they've wanted to do, maybe it's a side hustle they wanted to start. What was it for you that helped you pivot or drew you to what you're doing now?
Yeah, it's one of those where I loved coaching. I loved being in organized athletics. I did it for a little over 20 years as a college basketball coach, and then a high school athletic director at a large athletic program, fifth largest gymnasium in the world for high schools.
Wow.
Seated over 7,000 people. Indiana high school basketball. Many people will know Indiana high school basketball. You know, Hoosiers, sure. Hoosier hysteria, that kind of stuff. Well, the school I was at have won the most boys basketball state titles. So It was a basketball school. So as a basketball guy, it was great to be at a school like that. So I love being a coach. I love being an AD. What I didn't love, and I love diving into the lives of student athletes, helping coaches be better when I could. And most of the time it was, hey, here are a bunch of mistakes I made as a coach. Let's try not to do those. You know, I don't want you to go through what I've gone through or make the same mistakes and that kind of stuff. And so I like helping make people better, make situations better. One of the things, though, that I absolutely hate is being confined to an office. I don't like to be, you know, hey, you've got to be behind a desk. You've got to have these office hours. That was me. I didn't want office hours. I didn't want, you have to be in a building. You have to, whatever it is. I want to be free to roam. As long as I get my job done, as long as I do what I'm supposed to do, those office hours were a thorn in my side. And at the high school level, it's all about office hours. You have to be in that building. You know, don't be out fundraising, don't be out meeting people, don't be out, you know, whatever. You got to be in that building. And so that was kind of the thing that pushed me over the edge of, hey, what can I do to be in leadership and help people, but not be confined to an office? So, you know, I went into John Maxwell, got trained by John Maxwell and his teaching staff. And that was kind of the first time I realized that you could actually be a speaker. You could do this for a living and be a nobody, kind of, so to speak, because I thought the only people that do speaking are the Tony Robbins of the world. You know, the people that are absolutely, their presence is bigger than anything, or like a Bobby Bowden or a Jamy Bechler or a Nick Saban, the people that are really famous coaches. And when they're done coaching, they go on the speaking circuit. I didn't realize that people like you and I, you know, people that don't have millions and millions of followers or, you know, have made millions and millions each year at our job. I didn't realize people like us could actually go out there and speak. And so that's when I first learned that that was a possibility. So I looked into that. I jumped in with both feet, you know, jumped into the deep end without some floaties. I started my own business. I quit athletics, started my own business, and learned a million things, what not to do, learned a million things, what to do. But it was essentially, you can relate to this in college athletics. Those first couple of years was like being a graduate assistant again. It was like being, you know, 22 years old, 23 years old. You don't know what you don't know. But the reach of leadership, we're not able to dive as deep as I was when I was working with a sports team or a school, like full time.
Sure.
But you're able to maybe put some seeds out there for a lot more people than you were when you were just working with one team. And so that's been great, getting to work with so many sports teams or businesses and kind of put some seeds in their head about, you know what, I have a terrible boss or I have a terrible coach, but that doesn't control my attitude and effort. I can still be a good leader. I can still be a good employee, even though my boss is an idiot or my coach is an idiot. It's also been great putting seeds in the coaches' minds of, you know what, you might have parents or you might have players that you don't like, that are underachieving, that aren't motivated, that are selfish. But you know what? That doesn't make you then be a jerk as a coach. It doesn't make you do certain things as a coach. You still have to inspire them. And especially at the lower levels, you know, the higher levels you go where, you know, you're looking at this is a business, it's harder to really dive in and impact a life. You can still do it. Obviously, you can still do it. But the lower levels, smaller colleges, high schools, even junior high, you get into there, you know what? It's more important that you help them to be respectful, to not get in fights, to not get thrown into jail, than it is to teach them the newest offense or defense. Yeah. Right. You know, but we see in the pro level, you know, we see at the high level of Division I football or basketball, you know, the highest levels of college sports, that's still important too. It just gets pushed under the rug, swept under the rug a lot of times. But how many teams have been destroyed because a kid makes a terrible decision? Well, how many coaches had an opportunity to help them make better decisions in the 2 months previous to that bad decision, but they were more focused on X, Y, or Z, the X's and O's. They were more focused on the technical skills or more focused on our strategy and not focused on that kid. And not to go real deep on you, but oftentimes, even at the highest level, our performance can be positive or negative based upon how are we impacting lives and helping people make decisions that aren't even basketball related or aren't even business related.
Yep. It's so important because I think the key here is knowing yourself, right? Based on a couple of things you said here, knowing yourself, you didn't want to be closed in and be in an office space, right? You wanted to be at the freedom of roam, but also knowing yourself as a leader, like, am I the type of person, the type of leader who is head up, looking at the horizon, visionary, or do I tend to be more head down, working on the TPS reports again, like, and kind of, in the details? Like, you have to know yourself, because these are going to create blind spots. Either one, no matter how you're wired. And this is one of the things that we do in our leadership development is we start with an assessment, and when we help people get to know themselves and we get to know them at this sort of with this tool, now you put the tool together with the actual human being behind the tool and you unpack it and you can understand them. You can help them see their blind spots and say, hey, you know what, like, you might be focusing a little bit too much on the X's and O's here, while there's these other things that you could be focusing on that are going to actually help your people execute the X's and O's, right? Whether they're athletes or employees, et cetera. So I really, for the listener, I think the big takeaway here is understand yourself, know yourself. And then also going back to what Jamy did. I mean, he was in a great job, doing great, finding success, knew there was something else he wanted to do. And he went out and found a way to do it. I mean, he went out and found a way to do it despite his doubts, despite his wondering, like, oh, I thought only other people did this. No, like, you can go do that thing. Whatever that thing is you're thinking about, there are other people doing it and finding success in it, and you can do the same thing.
Yeah, and one of the questions you asked early on, kind of managing versus leading type stuff, that was one of the things I found at the high school as a high school AD. Even though there were so many great things about being a high school AD, especially at the school I was at, there was so much day-to-day managerial, dot the I's, cross the T's, that I didn't enjoy. And I didn't enjoy that a bulk of my time was making sure that the blue Powerade never ran out in the concession stand because people would complain, far be it that they would have to drink red Powerade instead of the blue Powerade, or, having to, do all these managerial or administrative things, which, yes, you have to do them. Absolutely, you have to do them. That wasn't my passion. My passion wasn't making sure paperwork is filled out. My passion was helping, forming a student athlete leadership group, or helping coaches to be better, helping coaches understand that, how they handle discipline, how they work with students, how they make decisions has a bigger impact than just that one game or that one situation or that one trip. That was fun to me. And so I was like, hey, how can I have, the good parts of this job without the bad parts of the job? And so I was like, well, I'll run my own business. I'll do this. And it's been great, other than, the one thing you forget when you start your own business is that it is a business. And so, it's fun to go up on stage. It's fun to work with a team. And then it's like, oh, wait a minute. We have all these bills and I have all these invoices and I have all these, this marketing stuff and this sales stuff that I'm not prepared for. So there's that business side of it. So yeah, pretty much the point of all that is, I love what I'm doing and I love the pivot, but you're never going to find the perfect situation. I was like, okay, if I start my own business, I have total flexibility and freedom. And you do, except that there's certain things that you're going to hate, just like there were certain things I hated being an AD. There's still things that are not going to be your ideal, and you just have to do it. And you have to find ways, either hire people, put systems and processes in place, spend a little extra time figuring out how am I going to handle this, figuring out, you just said it great, know yourself. Hey, if I've got invoicing or I have all this boring junk that I don't want to do, when am I best at doing that? Is there a certain day of the week? Is there a certain time of the day? Know myself, and so that it doesn't get pushed, and then all of a sudden you're late on stuff or stuff doesn't get done. So you've got to know yourself and figure out, all right, in the morning, I'm better at doing this stuff, or I'm more creative in the morning. I'm more creative at night. That's when I'm going to do my creative stuff, or whatever it is. Know yourself and then figure out when you can do that junk stuff that you don't like to do.
There's a great book that I read when I first started my first business back in the early 2000s called The E-Myth. The E stands for the entrepreneurial myth. And it's this idea that, just because you're a great carpenter, you could go start a custom home building company, or, you love to bake cookies, then, you can start a bakery. There's so much more that goes into it. And like you said, Jamie, building systems, building processes, hiring people. And it's so easy to hire people these days, in the sense that you can hire people to do very part-time work for you, work for 2 hours a week on, building SEO for your website, or, doing your invoice. I mean, there's so many different platforms out there where you can hire people to get them to do that stuff that you don't like. But at the end of the day, you're the leader. And actually, I was talking to another fellow entrepreneur I'm in a mastermind group with, and he said there's a difference between delegation and abdication, and like just sort of, just ignoring it, hiring somebody else to do it, and then saying, why is that not going so well? So you can't just abdicate everything and say that I'm going to hire people to do everything that I don't like. But there are certain things you have to hold on to, which is critical for entrepreneurs.
Well, I had an AD, my last coaching job, our AD, Jeff Bain, who's an NAIA Hall of Fame. He's in the Hall of Fame for the NAIA in the National Association of Collegiate Athletic Directors as well. But he always has a phrase. He always threw this out there. You can delegate task, but you can't delegate responsibility. And I always thought that was good. And one of the things that I think leaders do well, or good leaders do, is that they take responsibility for everything that happens. We're in a society and just human nature. We're the game that we play the best is the blame game. We point fingers. It's not my fault. Whether it's politics, whether it's our family, whether it's business, whether it's a sports team, at the end of the day, yeah, you want to learn from stuff. You want to learn from, why did this happen so we don't repeat it? But at the end of the day, I don't really care whose fault it was. I care about, did we find a solution? Are we moving forward? And I know there's a fine line between blame game, finding fault, and finding a solution for a problem and identifying the problem. But you can identify a problem but not dwell on it. So, when I go out this afternoon or tomorrow in my car and I fill it up and the gas price isn't quite what I want, I don't really care. I know this is not a political podcast, but I don't care if there's a Republican president or a Democrat president. I don't care whose fault it is. All I know is the gas price is higher than I would like it to be. Can we make the gas prices lower? Or my carton of eggs, can it be lower? I want a solution. I want the gas prices to be lower. I want the eggs to be cheaper. In my place of business, I want X, Y, or Z to be better. On my team, I want us to be achieving our potential. I want to win games as a player, as a coach. Let's find ways to do this together. Let's find ways to work toward progress where we're finding solutions and not necessarily placing blame or pointing fingers. I think a good leader finds ways to make things better, finds solutions to problems without always pointing the fingers. All right, Jim screws up in the game. Jim makes a turnover at the end of the game. That's a deciding play in the game, and we end up losing. It's not my fault necessarily because I wasn't out there dribbling for Jim. I didn't make that boneheaded decision Jim did at the end of the game. So it's not my fault as a leader. But it's 100% my responsibility to either have put Jim in the right position, B, to have equipped Jim or enhanced Jim's skills so that in that position he's able to maximize all of his skills, or now going forward to do one of those two things, to make Jim better or to put him in a position where he won't fail. Maybe I shouldn't have even had Jim on the floor. Maybe I shouldn't have called the play, that exact play. Maybe I should have recognized stuff. Maybe I should have been working more on Jim's skills than on our strategy. There's so many things as a leader. It's my responsibility. It might not be my fault, but it is my responsibility to find solutions and put us in the best possible position to be successful. And I think a lot of times as leaders, we're too busy playing the blame game. We're too busy finding fault. We're too, the college athletics, you were at the college level for a long time. I fell into this trap a lot. Well, Jim's terrible. Jim's driving me crazy. We're just going to recruit over him. We're going to go out and get better players. Okay, do that. But until Jim leaves your program, he's still part of your program, and you better do all you can to make him better. Your solution for the short term is not to recruit over him. Your solution for the short term is to make him as good as he can be until he leaves your program. Now, your long-term solution is to recruit over him. And probably the better solution is to figure out how we even got in a situation like Jim in the first place. Did I take a shortcut in recruiting? Do I not develop players very well? Are they not inspired? But so oftentimes we're like, well, I don't like him, or he's going to be gone. I've seen this in business. Well, we know we're going to fire this person at the end of the week. Okay, but for this week that you're allowing them to work, what are you doing to help them be better? Well, why would I help them be better? They're gone at the end of the week. Yeah, but you still have 5 days. You have 5 days with this person in your employment, in your office. They could make or break a person, a coworker next to them. They could infiltrate. They could influence, good or bad. Who knows? Maybe there could be a miracle, but probably not. But we're so in this mentality of finding fault and pointing fingers, and I just don't think the best leaders are doing that.
Jamy, as we head towards the close of our conversation here, I want to ask you, what kind of morning routines do you have? Do you have any specific either morning routines or daily routines that you do that really help you be a peak performer day to day?
When I do get up in the morning, I have a whiteboard. I have a bunch of whiteboards in my office. And I like dry erase boards or whiteboards. I was a coach, so I like that. But that's where I do like long-term stuff, weekly stuff. I want to have vision of what I need to do a couple months from now. And then I have other boards for more specific stuff. So we have an online program, theleadershipplaybook.com. On my day-to-day stuff, I don't say anything about theleadershipplaybook.com because I have a separate whiteboard for that because there's so many things involved in that. So I have a specific board devoted to just one aspect of my business. And then I have a couple other boards for these are long-term projects I want to do. This is money we have coming in, or these are people I have to follow up with, the main people I have to follow up with. So I have different boards for different things. I have about 5 different whiteboards in my office.
So for the listener who is buying into your philosophy of leadership, what is an action item they could do? Something in the next 24 to 48 hours to up their game as a leader, again, whether they're a leader in title or not. What's an action item for the listener?
I would sit down and I would take 5 minutes and think about you could even jot this down. How am I being a leader versus how am I being a manager? What am I doing that's more leadership, visionary, making people better as opposed to day-to-day task? And for most of us, I think it's going to be a lot more day-to-day stuff. This is what I'm doing. This is what I'm doing. As a coach, this is what I do. This is what I do. This is what I do. As a supervisor, this is what I do. And I think your list is going to be a lot longer. And then you have to decide for yourself, all right, what do I want to be? Is this going to be more equal? Is it going to be more in one area? What does my job entitle? So think about maybe looking at it a different way. When I come home at night and I talk to my spouse and I'm banging my head against the wall about stuff, am I typically banging my head against the wall because of these certain reports that I had to fill out today? Or was it about my boss? Or was it about a certain employee? Or was it about, they don't seem to be motivated, or they don't care, or, I got to find another employee. We've got to hire someone again. Oftentimes, the people stuff, the people issues are the things that we're banging our head about, not the actual minutia of the job. The job description type stuff. Those are not the things that I'm complaining about, banging my head against the wall about. So when you start listing out stuff, you'll start finding, I think, that most of the stuff that you focus on is the day-to-day minutia, the managerial stuff. But the things that you complain about the most, or the things that drive you crazy, are people issues. And so if that's the case, then you're going to have to start tweaking and saying, all right, what can I do to balance this out a little bit more? If the people issues are the ones that are driving me crazy, then I need to focus and be more intentional on people issues. Don't solve people problems with administrative solutions. That's not always going to work. Just putting together some standard operating procedures, here's another memo, here's another report. That's not going to solve the problem I have with Jim every day. That's just another rule that he's not going to follow. So don't solve a people problem with an administrative solution.
Yeah, great advice. Jamy, for the listener who wants to find you, follow you, where can they track you down at?
Yeah, one of the best places is on Twitter or X, at Coach Bechler. At Coach Bechler is where we try to put out positive leadership stuff. Don't follow me there, though, if you want to know my favorite sports teams or what I ate for lunch or who I voted for in a presidential election or anything like that. You don't get much of that. We try to keep it inspirational and positive. But my website's coachbechler.com, coachbechler.com, and you can find all of our resources, books, all that kind of stuff there, blog, podcast stuff, all that stuff at coachbechler.com.
Excellent. Jamy, thank you so much for making time to come on the show.
Appreciate it, Jim. Thank you.
Likewise.